Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder, and this is the program where we dig deeper to understand what really matters most in business. Today, I am pleased to welcome Jurriaan Kamer, who is a co-founder at Unblock. He's also the author of a book called Unblock, Clear the Way for Results and Develop a Thriving Organization. Jurriaan, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Well, thank you for having me, Dave. I'm really excited to be part of the show.
Yeah, and looking forward to having a great conversation about how to develop a thriving organization. But before we jump into the details here, introduce yourself to the audience a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm a Netherlands-based Dutch organizational change agent, leadership coach, and the co-founder of a small consultancy called Unblock. And yeah, so we help leaders all across the world try to improve how they work to achieve the results they're looking for.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the book. So I'd
Mhm.
love to understand, first of all, what inspired you to write it and what will readers find when they go through it?
Yeah, so I've been practicing lots of different management methodologies over the years, and we found a good mix of things that consistently work. And so I decided to write another book about it. And it's important to have a book because you can only reach so many people, and the book ends up in places that we don't expect, and it allows us to spread the word and to help more leaders without being face to face with them all the time.
Yeah, I'd like to take a deep dive into that because you talk about a lot of interesting things to create that thriving organization that we talked about at the top of the program here. And if you don't mind, I kind of want to step through it
Hmm.
and allow you to react to some things, and we'll see where this conversation goes. But I
Sure.
wanted to start with strategy. I know you talk about creating a strategy that creates alignment.
Yeah. So the book covers six of the most common obstacles for results. And many leaders think that they have a great strategy, that they have a clear strategy, that they've done all the work around strategy. But more often than not, the strategy itself is a blocker because it either doesn't contain good choices or trade-offs that you're willing to make, or it's just so vague and abstract that it doesn't mean anything to the people on the shop floor. So the first part of the book is really about how do you craft a strategy that actually creates that alignment and focus at scale. And yeah, there's a bunch of ways to do that, but most importantly, it's really about creating that clarity of what you really need to be doing in the next 2 to 3 years for everyone in the organization, so that the focus can do that.
Yeah, and strategy is one of those living and breathing things because even if you think you get it right out of the gate, over time you've got to learn to react and adapt. So,
Yeah.
with the benefit of hindsight, is only when you really determine whether or not a strategy is working, right?
Yeah, I agree. So, a strategy should really be inspected at least a couple times a year to see if it actually still does the thing that you want it to do. And it is hypothesis. So it's not something that is. So you can be wrong when you set a strategy, and you just have to accept that sometimes you just pick a strategy and it's not turning out well. Then you have to pivot as soon as you learn that it's the case.
Yeah. Do you have any general guidelines on how leaders should be checking in on strategy, timeline wise, benchmark wise?
Yeah. So I think at least so strategy should be part of your daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly rhythms. So it should be always on your mind, because a good strategy should guide day-to-day decisions and should allow you to evaluate if you're getting closer to where you want to be. But the strategy horizon is something that shouldn't be too far away and shouldn't be too short. So let me clarify that. So often we think about a strategy being an annual thing, like connected to the annual goals of an organization. But I actually challenge people to think a little bit further out. So think at least 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years out about what are the big things, the big shifts that need to happen for you to stay alive as a company or to grow. And don't go too far out. So don't set a strategy for the next 10 years because the world is so unpredictable. But putting it like 2 or 3 years out really allows you to be bolder than you would be for a 1 year plan, and it allows you to really sit back and reflect, like, what are the big things that we need to achieve, rather than staying into the short term or the quarterly mindset that many leaders are in.
Yep. And when we talk about strategy comprises a number of different components, right? You've got the aggregate strategy of perhaps we're going to grow revenue, we're going to increase
Hmm.
profitability,
Hmm.
but underpinning all of that are the components of increasing customer awareness and market reach and things like that. So how do you align all of the subcategories with the main strategy, if you will?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think first of all, the willingness to grow is like the ambition to grow numbers isn't a strategy in itself. But it's a common trap. Like it's like we have to be the number one in the market. Well, that's great, but what is the strategy? The strategy is the actual choices you're going to make, the actual trade-offs you're willing to make, the actual initiatives you're going to launch, so that you maximize your chances of achieving that. So that's the first mindset shift. Like the strategy is not we need to increase that number. It is about what are the things we're deploying to be able to achieve it. And a strategy is also a fractal. So, meaning that there's a top level strategy that should integrate the biggest shifts for the whole organization. But then there's also a marketing strategy that is connected to that. And there might be a sales strategy connected to that. So sometimes it helps to just unpack it at different levels of different functions of the organization, and to just acknowledge that every layer of the organization has a strategy, basically the plan that they are willing to go after to achieve the top level strategy.
Yeah, and then when you talk about strategy, the next piece that you discuss is the idea of steering, and we talk about setting effective goals, but maybe even more importantly, finding the right things to measure.
Mm-hmm.
How do we identify the real critical metrics when we think about measuring our strategy?
Yeah, so a lot of the metrics that we follow are important. KPIs, metrics, whatever you want to call them, they're lagging indicators of success. And I've found, I've worked with so many leaders that got hung up on this, like, oh no, the sales is going up or down, or there's lots of things you can measure that are lagging indicators, and those are helpful things to know. But it's even more helpful to identify the leading indicators that might help you achieve those lagging indicators. And that's what I call steering metrics. So it's the behavior either on your digital platforms or in your sales conversations that you have identified will ultimately lead to future success. And so that's the trick. It's like, what are the leading indicators that will help us steer? And the other trick is to change the metrics all the time, to figure out, okay, so we're learning along the way how our success is created. Well, and then we're learning also what metrics to follow and what metrics we can safely drop because they're not doing anything for us. And then less is more. Letting teams and parts of the organization pick their own steering metrics. And it's a tool basically that they are having to follow their progress.
Yeah, can you share a story, maybe, or give an example of a situation where a company had defined some metrics that they thought were critical and
Yeah.
then made a change in course along the way?
Yeah, for sure. So I worked a lot with pharma companies, and one of the clients we had, they were responsible for running the factory and for making sure the factories have no downtime. Basically, they can always run. And they obviously identified that the number of accidents that are happening is critical. Like it's if somebody trips over something, or somebody uses the wrong tool, then an accident happens, and then there's downtime. But accidents is not something you can directly influence. It's something that is related to potentially how many people are wearing their safety equipment, or what are the noise and temperature levels. If there's more noise and more temperature, then the people get more stressed and they make an accident easily. If the workload is higher, those are things related to accidents. So we helped them map out all the possible things they could measure that ultimately lead to accidents, and how they influence each other as well. And then we looked at all the possible things they could measure and figure out which of these could be easily implemented, and what is the potential value if we measure this related to this ultimate lagging indicator of having less accidents. So and then they said, you know what, basically the couple things we are already measuring, these things we need to monitor closely because they're leading indicators, and a few we could easily start measuring with little investment, because that's the other component. You cannot measure everything, and you have to pick carefully how much investment you're going to make in measuring certain things, because there's a cost related to that. So that's kind of the balancing act.
Yeah, and within all of that is the idea of decision making,
Yeah,
prudent decisions, and you talk about the speed of decision making.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like decision making, everything your organization does or doesn't do is the result of a decision or indecision. And so it's really like the bloodstream of an organization. I think great leadership teams, they should obsess around how they make decisions, how fast they make decisions, but more importantly, what types of tools they're using for what types of decisions. While writing the book, I discovered a really fun metaphor that I use a lot, which it was invented by James Clear, and he says there's only three types of decisions. There are hats, haircuts, and tattoos. So, for example, if you go and buy a hat, you can go in the store and you try a number of them. If you don't like them, you can always pick a different one, or maybe after the fact you bring them back and buy a new one. The cost of that is the cost of getting it wrong is not really big. It's not consequential. A haircut is a little bit trickier. If you get a haircut and you get a bad haircut, you might feel ashamed for a while, or you might feel foolish. You might wear that hat that you also bought. But the problem will go away within a few weeks automatically. It's not something that you have to live with forever. And there's a very small percentage of decisions that resemble a tattoo, meaning that it's technically still a reversible decision, but reversing it is not going to be cheap or painless. So tattoos are, but there's so it's really about considering what type of decision are we facing here. Is it reversible? Is there a cost of reversing that is big? Is there what are the consequences if we get it wrong? And then picking the right tool for that.
Yeah, those are great metaphors because it speaks to the magnitude of the consequence of getting it wrong.
Yeah.
And clearly, the greater the magnitude for downside risk, I would imagine the longer you'd want to spend in processing your decision making.
Yeah, for sure. It's really the making people aware of the cost of analysis paralysis, and figuring out, like, if we're going to lose another week, another month making this decision, what is that costing us? And we should factor that into the decision itself.
Yeah. And one of the things that you also then talk about in the book is this concept of ownership and autonomy, where people, the employees, have an ownership stake in the processes. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that, Jurriaan.
Yeah. So the whole book is built on the idea of aligned autonomy, meaning that that I strongly believe that when you're working with knowledge workers, when you work with any type of worker, actually, they are highly skilled in the craft, and you should hire people that don't need to be told what to do, basically, right? So but to achieve that, you want to give them a high level of autonomy to figure out what work to do, how to do it, but at the same time you want all of the work of everyone to add up to the bigger picture. And that's where the alignment part comes into play. So in the book, I give a lot of practices of creating a state of aligned autonomy, so that the work can flow naturally. And ownership is a big part of that. And it's close to empowerment, but I'm not a huge fan of the word of empowerment, because it assumes that people are powerless unless they're empowered. I really want to work from the opposite perspective, is that people already have the power, but you have to figure out a way how you can leverage their power in the workplace. And one way that where it's really helpful to do that is to make really clear what types of decisions people can make already without needing to ask for approval. So those decision rights are often left. They're often implicit, or not written down, or not made explicit. And people just have, when they show up at a new employer, they have to kind of figure out by tiptoeing themselves into different areas to say, oh, can I do this? Can I not do this? Should I ask for approval or not? And you can save a lot of time by just sitting down and saying, you know what, this is your decision right. As a leader, you don't need to ask for approval. Maybe you need to ask for advice for certain types of decisions, but it's just a great way to unlock more autonomy and decision-making speed.
Yeah, and again, underpinning all of that, it's great that these are all connected pieces here. But underpinning all that is building an environment of trust, right?
Yeah,
Psychological safety, I guess, is another term of art that's being used
yeah,
to foster this type of teamwork.
yeah, for sure. It's all about um, working from the assumption of trust. And then obviously that can be lost if people are not behaving. But the basic assumption should be that people should be, could be trusted. And that when people are making mistakes, it's usually either a lack of information or a lack of skill or a lack of tools that is causing that, rather than the people's motive and intentions. Um, so yeah, I talk also in the book. I also talk a lot about how to deal with mistakes and how to, um, how to deal gracefully with mistakes and basically celebrating failure. Because if you want an organization that is going faster toward your goal, you need more innovation, you need more initiatives, and that automatically comes with more failures. And it's also it's a thing for leaders to learn, is to be more comfortable with that and giving the right response to when that happens.
Yeah, I want to unpack that a little bit further with you when you talk
Hmm.
about celebrating failure, because I'd be remiss if I didn't share the fact that in the idea of what I call the new ROI, Return on Individual series, a couple of books that I've written, there's empirical data that speaks to the idea that when organizations create these environments of trust and psychological safety, they get more from their people. People are more engaged, more productive,
Yeah.
and it increases their valuation. And it's all connected. So when you talk about failure, a knee-jerk reaction would be, "Oh my God, no!" But you're saying embrace it. So let's go there. Let's explore that.
Yeah, I mean, so often when something goes wrong, a leader will say, or might say, this may never happen again, right? And that is a very dangerous thing to say, because that maybe creates an extra rule or an extra check and balance that will slow everything down. So you have to be careful of saying something like that. You have to be careful with blaming someone, because it's a two-way. You talked about trust, like it's a two-way situation where you trust your people, but your people are also looking for ways like, can I trust my leader here?
Yeah.
Meaning that, am I do I feel comfortable with taking a risk without being afraid of either being ridiculed in front of the whole group or being blamed for a mistake, right? So trust can go in Dutch. We have a saying like, um, trust comes by foot, but it departs on a horse. It's a really strange phrase if you translate it. But the idea is like, trust is something that builds up slowly, but it can be gone really quickly if handled wrongly. So yeah, you really want to create an environment where people are afraid to share strange, unformed ideas as early as possible, without being afraid of being ridiculed for that, so that they can actually start building on other people's ideas without needing to polish everything, which will slow everything down.
Yeah, innovation comes from being in a safe space environment where you can
Yeah.
offer ideas. I can tell you that earlier in my career, I saw the dichotomy of the good and the bad, and the bad was kind of the ugly piece. So I'll go with the ugly just to share that story. So
Hmm.
inside an organization, I was luckily not on the receiving end of this, but witnessed the CEO literally humiliate people in a public forum for mistakes. Another circumstance. So for me personally, especially earlier in my career, if I ever made a mistake in a spreadsheet or model or something like that, I would internalize that for weeks, and I would just beat myself up over it.
Hmm.
And luckily, worked with some great leaders who just reminded me that I'm a human being and shit happens, and
Yeah.
you can fix it and just move on and get past that. And it's a pretty strong lesson to understand as the employee on the receiving end of that kind of feedback.
For sure. And it's even further, like it's also a lever for creating the right culture. If you do it, if you kind of make it part of the culture to celebrate failure in a way. One of the best examples that I witnessed was a Dutch online retail company, like the Dutch Amazon, so to say. They have a culture of, during their all hands meetings, which I think happens once a month. Um, they've been having a ritual where one of the executives, they come on stage dressed like a priest, asking if somebody has a confession to make. And they do it like with a lot of humor, and usually they let other executives go first, sharing their confessions, their mistakes, and more importantly, what did they learn from those mistakes. And if this happens at scale, it means that if you're able to learn from everyone's mistakes, then you grow capability and you grow agency of the people in your workplace.
That's fascinating. I want to get into a topic here that I think everyone is going to love and enjoy thoroughly. The topic of meetings. And you advocate getting rid of useless meetings and replacing them with things that are, more engaging, if you will.
Hmm.
Let's talk about, first of all, how do you define a useless meeting? How do you know you're setting one up, and how do we make
Yeah.
that change?
Yeah, the whole chapter and the whole philosophy here is to be intentional with people's time, rather than just going through the motions of having meeting after meeting after meeting. How to know if it's valuable? Well, one thing we always ask people to do at the end of every meeting, it only takes 5 minutes, is to just reflect back on the value of the meeting. Have like one round where people say, you know what, how did we do today? How useful was this meeting to you? What did you take away from it? And if people are signaling, I didn't take away anything of it, or you're noticing that a lot of the people that are in the room haven't even spoken during the meeting, well, then you have a good signal that it's really not adding any value. Um, yeah, and I throw around a lot of different ideas, but to one of the things I recommend leaders doing and every team is to sit back and think, what are the types of conversations that we need to have, at what cadence, and who needs to be involved in those. And then you basically design from scratch a rhythm of meetings to force you to have those conversations and to create a place for those things. And if you do that well, you can get rid of a lot of the other impromptu meetings that are on the schedule. So it's about noticing the patterns in the types of meetings that you're in and your team is dealing with, and seeing if you can focus them around like recurring things on the rhythm that will create an automatic space for those things.
Yeah. Now, right now, as you're saying those words, there are people who are looking at their Outlook calendars and seeing that they are stacked back to back
Yeah.
throughout the day for the next month.
Uh-huh. Yep.
How do you help them to evaluate how to get out of those things? Because
Yeah.
some of them, they may not have scheduled. Some of them
Yep.
may have been invited to. And frankly, over my career, I've known a few people who were really interested and keen on just meeting for this. It felt like the sake of meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple of things you can do. First of all, especially the recurring ones, try to the things that are just coming back every week or every month on your schedule. Try to figure out what's the intention or the purpose of that meeting. Is there a set of outcomes that you can set so you know if the meeting is achieving its objective or not? And if that is difficult, then maybe the meeting should just be canceled. It also depends on your position of authority. So if you are a leader, you're higher up in the organization, your schedule will automatically fill up with lots of stuff, and it has, for some people it feels good, right? To be felt important because people invite them into everything. But as a leader, you also have to flex the muscle of saying no to a meeting that you're invited in and saying, you know what, I trust that you do the right thing without me. You know, I'm still super curious, and I still really value the work you're doing. Just let me know in a few weeks what you've done, or maybe you create a space where people can show off what they've learned. But just tell them, I don't need to. Already have the authority to make decisions. You don't need me here. And if you start doing that more consistently, then your schedule will start to clear up. The other thing is like really protect more time for deep work. Like one thing that I recommend leaders is to block off 2 to 3 hours a day that cannot be scheduled, and just say, you know what, I'm just never available around those times for meetings, because I use that time to do actual work, or to talk to people that I walk around, if you're in an office, or to do
Yeah.
deep work, that requires concentration or reflection. So it's really about, if you're facing a schedule like that, sit back and think about how would you like to spend your time, and what types of things that you really want to have a meeting for, and see if you can come up with some criteria and to filter through your stacked days.
Yeah, a couple of things there. The blocking of the calendar time, I think, is a great idea, and it's absolutely critical because in this day and age, people have access to other people's calendars, and will just assign you to a meeting because they see you're available.
Yeah.
And with Calendly and things like that, if you're not blocking it, you're going to get scheduled. So yeah,
Yep.
protect yourself. The other thing I just want to share with the audience is I work for a firm that runs on the entrepreneurial operating system, EOS. And our meetings are very intentional. They've got strict agendas, strict time frames. We adhere to them. We accomplish what we're setting out to do. And then we rank the meetings at the end to make sure, like you said, have they been effective? And those are great frameworks. Jurriaan, we're getting
Cool.
close to the end here, but kind of bringing the whole thing home is the idea of taking all of these things that we've talked about here and baking it into the DNA of the organization to make these long-lasting cultural changes. How do we do that?
Yeah, it's really about developing the skill and the ritual to constantly reflect on how we are working together and if that's serving us or not. So if you only take away one thing of this whole podcast and the book and everything I do, is to schedule time with your team or with your teams to take out time out of your daily work and spend time reflecting and talking about the past. It's a practice we call retrospective. It's a common name, but it's not often done outside of the more product development or software teams. For leaders, just take an hour, take 2 hours every month to talk about, what if we reflect back on the last month, what did we do really well? What can we really build on for the next period? And what are the things that really are in our way? And force yourself to take an organizational lens there. Do we see blockers in decision making? Do we see lack of ownership? Do we see clarity in our strategy? And then make an effort to do that. And if you just keep putting those reflection moments in your schedule and make it recurring, and just make it a non-negotiable part of your meeting rhythm, then hopefully, if you use that time well, your problems will dissolve using after just a while.
I love that idea. I love that suggestion because so often, and you hear it all the time, the quote is that business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders are too busy working in the business as opposed to
Yeah,
on the business. And by having those times for reflection, it gives them the chance to take the bigger picture perspective.
for sure.
Love that. Jurriaan, before we go, tell the audience a little bit about how they can find you, where they can reach out to you on social media, and really, where can they get the book?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. So just type in Unblock, and maybe you should add my name because otherwise you can't get stuff to unblock your sewage. So Unblock book or Unblock Jurriaan, you'll find it on Amazon. Unblockbook.net. You'll see more information about the book. And I'm mostly active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. Just type in my name, and unblock.works is our company website.
That's great. Jurriaan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us today. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
It's been great having you in the program. Love talking about this subject. And thank you out there for your support. I want to share this breaking news with the audience. I just learned this morning that Behind the Numbers with Dave Bookbinder has been named the #1 business valuation podcast to watch. And you can't do that and get that recognition without your continued support. So thank you so much for your continued support of this program. Until next time, I am Dave Bookbinder, reminding you that the numbers tell the story, but the people bring it to life. Take care, everybody.